The new Gauntlet game mode is a very interesting challenge and is fairly different in how you can approach it compared to all of the other gameplay related content in the game. There seems to be a number of viable strategies, and learning how to approach the game mode with what heroes and emblems you want to use can be vital to your success. And in this video, I want to give you some advice and tips for how to approach the Gauntlet to have the most success. I'll also show off a couple strategies I personally like that I think will make it easier to complete, including one that trivializes it with sheer damage output. As always, if you enjoy these guides, please be sure to subscribe to the channel because it really does help me out so much. Let's get into this. So let's talk about the most important aspects to your success in this mode. That's going to be your emblem management and hero choices. So if you're trying to clear, first things I would highly recommend using are the shop to buy increased starting level on all the emblems you consider the most valuable. So I went ahead and got everything except for event rate up because that one sucks, and also because besides that one I consider mostly all of them to have some use with certain strategies, except for maybe the emblems that boost your stats if you have 3 or more other party members that aren't from Kavesi or Agnian sides. This will allow you to spawn the emblems at a higher starting level in the shop between waves of enemies, which is very beneficial to both save money and increase your combat stats and abilities much further instantly. If you're trying to tackle higher levels of the Gauntlet, this is basically essential. Also, make sure you at least unlock emblems from the shop like boss HP down, defense up, and so on, because those are going to be extremely helpful as well. So next, let's talk about heroes. How you select your heroes is very important in this mode, since you don't have access to the main party members. You really want to have heroes that bring useful abilities or utility to the party or contribute in some way to the strength of the character you intend on using. For me, I always look to have Masha and Nia very early on. Ideally, I want at least one of the two in the first 2 waves, and that gives you 2 free heroes, and the others soon after, or even both in some situations early on. Masha gives critical up to the entire party along with increased critical damage and allows for 4 field effects. Nia provides a party-wide damage reduction ability and increase to healing. These are very useful effects. Miyabi is another extremely good support healer you will likely want in most party compositions. Swift Song gives a very nice boost to party accuracy and evasion. She has lots of tools that recharge your arts more often so you can use them more, and her death can be clutch for the rest of the team since everyone will get all of their arts back to use instantly, which is super nice and may help you clutch out a win. A couple other notable heroes include Asher and Fiona if you plan on chain attacking, as they allow you to hit some very high numbers thanks to Asher's general usefulness in increasing damage ratios, and Fiona's ability to give the party an extra chain attack round. Besides that, you may want to pick heroes based on any kind of alignment emblems you plan to use. There are certain emblems based on whether the majority of your characters are Kavesi, Agnian, or other, along with emblems that increase your stats based on how many of a certain role you have in your party. So if you're playing attacker, with certain sets you may want to stack attackers for that reason, and party members from the country your main character is in. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Besides that, a couple other notable heroes are Xeon for being extremely tanky if you need an additional lifeline, a good candidate to put a memory locket on, and Riku and Manana for giving bonuses for both the Kavesi and Agnian sides, as well as providing a spammable break art, and a few debuffs that actually work way better in this mode than the rest of the game, thanks to some emblem effects. When it comes to heroes, they have very, very rare spawn rates for a specific hero in a shop, so as long as you have the money, those are one of the things I would say you should pretty much be buying instantly as long as you have the ability to do so when they appear in the shop. Now, there are definitely some emblems you're not going to want to buy instantly. You can definitely save some of them for later if you don't want to spend a huge chunk of money, and I definitely recommend doing this because of another emblem effect called money bags, which we'll talk about soon. But heroes are very rare, so if you have the money to buy them, those are one of the things that I recommend just getting as soon as you possibly can, just to make sure you can get your ideal party composition as soon as possible, because it'll increase your success rate much more. So let's talk about emblem effects now. So my initial plan was to just kind of show all the emblems on screen, but apparently there's no way to do that in this game unless you bought literally all of them and check the emblems you have during the Gauntlet, which is kind of annoying. So I'm just going to kind of highlight what I believe is going to be the best options for that and how you're going to want to spend in the shop to get as much advantage out of these emblems as possible. So first of all, the flat common stat boosts are going to be very, very important. I would recommend picking these up very early on, at least picking up a couple levels, 1 or 2 levels of each of these very early on before they get more expensive, and then you can stop spending on them for at least a little bit. The emblems that boost your attack greatly especially gives you 120% attack boost at the start, boosting your dexterity by like 90% at the very beginning, and boosting attack by 60% at the very beginning is also incredibly good. Boosting your maximum health is awesome in this mode as well, because that'll cancel out some of the curse effects really nicely, since all of the health boosts are additive, meaning that with enough max HP boost, you can pretty much not have to worry about all the curses that lower your max HP too much if you want to buy some of those, because some of them actually legitimately do have very nice effects to have. The defense emblem will also reduce damage taken by a set percentage. This is not affected by past level 70. It'll still keep reducing the amount of damage you take. That irreducible damage is just extra damage that's tacked onto the amount of damage that enemies deal. It has nothing to do with the damage reduction that you have, so that is still extremely useful there, so you definitely want to keep using that. Healing power up is also good because you have much higher max HP, so being able to actually heal is pretty impactful to get all that max HP back, especially if you have ZM with over 70,000 health, which can happen sometimes. There's a number of other really useful effects on other trees, but the basic stats are stuff you're definitely going to want to invest in because they're just always going to be universally useful, especially as you get higher into the challenge. Now, once again, like I said, these are something you're only going to want to invest 1 or 2 levels in before just sitting on them for a little bit because you don't want to spend too much money and they can get expensive pretty quickly as you get to higher levels. I actually recommend certain effects just buying into immediately when you see them in the shop, and certain effects not really taking higher levels up until you get higher amounts of money, because there is a very important emblem effect called money bags. This will boost all of your attacking stats even further. The actual description will boost your attack mods from emblems for each 10,000 on your score, and it'll max out at 100,000. It's based on your current score, not how much you've gained total, so if you keep spending, you will not get this bonus effect. And this is an extremely noticeable effect because it boosts all of your attack boosts from all of your other emblems. So this is something you want to keep in mind when you're buying your attack boosts and buying other emblems in the shop. By the time I get to like stage 40 or to 70, I like to start stacking this up, especially because that's when it starts getting a lot more impactful. So generally you want to get a couple levels of each kind of attack boost while they're still cheap when you see them in the shop. And then you want to save money before you start buying the more expensive stuff. And then once you get over that 100,000 score, once you start getting into the higher numbers, then you can start buying more of the more expensive stuff as it shows up in the shop. But you just want to keep your money bags bonus because it's the most noticeable effect, I would say, in this entire game mode. You will hit some absolutely crazy damage numbers as long as you are keeping it in mind. As far as other attack boosts that are incredibly useful, obviously Last Ditch Effort is amazing for up to a 500% damage boost when under 50% nopwatch or lower, which is very easy to obtain. I would say if there's any effects that you should just automatically buy immediately anytime it's in the shop, as long as you have the money to do so, it would be stuff like the shop prices down effect. That's extremely useful for saving you money in the long run. Score up, that's also extremely useful for saving you money in the long run, as long as you got the max HP to spend and not have to worry about being super low on health at least. There's a couple other really useful effects. I would recommend combo duration up. Anytime you see that in the shop, make sure you grab that. Obviously, money bags, if you see that in the shop, make sure you grab that. Combo duration up also gives an insane attack boost. This also affects how long your launch charge lasts, which is super impactful because launch charge is one of the best abilities in this game. You can also boost debuff effect duration to boost your attack slightly. This is more useful for the attack boost in most situations, although there are a couple debuff builds I've seen that actually work properly in this mode because of other abilities that allow you to increase your debuff success rate. There's actually a lot of really interesting builds. You can even make auto attacks work by stacking all the auto attack emblems if you really, really want to. As far as other things that I would say is extremely impactful to stack as soon as possible, if you ever see Agni and Zeal and you're using Agni and party members, I definitely grab that because it's a little bit more on the rare side. Definitely grab those. If you see the attack boost, if you're using attacker party members, grab that as well. Those give pretty noticeable boosts also because those will end up hitting really high numbers as you go further into the challenge. I also like curse damage up, so where you get damage up based on the number of curses you have, because there's actually a lot of useful curse effects that don't really impact you that negatively. And also, there's a Tickle Whimsy effect, which I think is super good because events are terrible, so that's not even a negative curse effect. I think events... There are good events, obviously, but the chance of a bad event screwing you over is always much higher than a good event actually helping you from just what I played, so I definitely prefer the Whimsy events because you get to take advantage of the Whimsies and basically always pick a good one in most situations. You can even reroll those with some of your tickets as well, which is always going to be really good if you somehow get 2 bad effects that you don't want. Really, besides that, I would say a lot of this game mode is really just about money management. When enemies are weaker early on, you're not going to need as many raw stats, you're not going to need as many emblems, so that's why you can start stacking up your money to take advantage of the money bags emblem, assuming you have that. And like I said, buy that in the shop whenever you see it. It's just such a useful effect. It gets incredibly powerful very, very quickly. I truly do believe it's better to focus on getting your score up sooner than it is to focus on just buying everything useful as you see it in the shop, because money bags is just such an incredibly useful effect, and you can just buy a lot of the more expensive things later. Later levels of the stat boost, which cost over 11k, can be really nice if you wait till later, especially if you grab shop boosts or shop discounts along the way. You can always buy those instantly, like I said. If you buy the score boosts based on how many Agnians you have in your party, or Kavesi if you're using a Kavesi team, you buy the score boost just based on the curse effect that increases your score from max HP down. That's a really useful effect. There's a lot of ways to increase the amount of score you get and take advantage of spending less over time, because that's going to be the key to success in this mode, is just stacking up as many positive effects as you can later on and taking advantage of big damage increases as you can. So let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics of this game mode. So launch charge is an incredibly useful effect. I would recommend saving this for bosses if you can, or using it in some situations where you might get lucky monsters that might increase your score or increase your other launch charge gauge effects. You can get a lot of benefit out of launch charge. It also grants bonus times, meaning all of your score will be increased while it is active, so it can be useful to use on normal mob enemies in the right situations, especially if you're trying to get lucky monster kills. But just be aware of how you take advantage of this and use this. If you are using a Kavesi character or any character that has access to an area of effect smash, this can be extremely useful to just kind of instantly launch and instantly smash a bunch of enemies to get a huge score boost. It also allows you to get past some challenges that might be more difficult, especially if it's one of the ones that has Mobius spawns or enemy rush and you don't want to deal with too many enemies. Just being able to instantly launch and smash all of the enemies at once and just kill them all is super good. I recommend saving the launch charge for these specific situations and being wary of how you use it. It's also really nice because you have the ability to just kind of stop bosses if you're in a bad situation, so it's a good panic button. If a boss is about to really use a really dangerous move, you can completely interrupt them no matter what that move is. I find that to be super useful, so make sure you're using your launch charges smartly. You also have a chain attack that can stop you from getting hit by enemies, and if you know how to optimize the chain attack, you can hit some pretty impressive damage with those as well. If you have a party that involves Fiona and Ashura, like I said, those are really useful party members to get as much benefit out of your chain attacks as possible. Ashura can guarantee you get 3 party members back, increase your damage ratio by an insane amount, so you can have a good rest of your chain attack. Fiona grants an extra round of a chain attack, gives power charge also. And if you're running Uni with Full Metal Jaguar, like I like to do sometimes, you can get a bunch of additional damage out of that, since Uni will lower ether defense of enemies. Melia is also a pretty impactful party member for some of these setups and provides a good party buff as well to consider if you want to run her. I think as far as general tips and basics, that probably covers most of what you'd want to know, so let's take a look at some more specifics of this funny Seraph build and the Full Metal Jaguar Evasion and Smash build for a more team-based environment. You've been seeing this the entire time and are probably curious. So the Seraph build you've been seeing relies very heavily on damage stacking and just killing all enemies before they have a chance to kill me. With Seraph's skill set, it feels like it was made for this game mode because it can stack damage extremely high and take advantage of Element Genesis to do massive damage, since Element Genesis gets a massive boost of damage based on the amount of elements you have summoned, and that is conveniently a Master Art, allowing you to take full advantage of that with all of the Agnian classes. The general setup I'm running focuses on the Shackle Ring, which is a very funny accessory that increases the effect of arts based on previous arts used. I really need to make a guide specifically for this accessory, but the short of it is that each unique art in a row that you use, including your talent art, gets increased effects up to 80% for the 6th unique art. This includes fusion arts as well. This applies up to an 80% independent damage boost to everything, which is absolutely absurd since it's an additional and exclusive way to get an independent multiplier in this game. Combined with Element Genesis, that can become absurd very quickly. It helps that basically all of Seraph's skills increase damage and are easily to apply in this game mode thanks to multiple enemies and launch charge. I use Senna for this solely because she is Agnian and has the highest attack, so she can take best advantage of the emblems I wanted to use. My other accessories are Gust Bracelet to instantly have all of my arts off cooldown, very important for both Summon Element and Cross Impact to grant power charge, and my crafted Pro Ring that increases both attack and crit rate, really useful to have in this mode. My art setup is about as you would expect here. Summon Element and Cross Impact are very important. Besides that, I have Quick Draw and Flame Lord as a front attack evasion combo to get a talent art up faster, and Leveling Fire as an aura and increase to attack. My skills involve Capable Hands to always have Element Genesis up at the start of combat, so I can use it as soon as possible, so you can wipe most waves in this mode with minimal effort. Ultimate Qigong is very important as well because it increases all physical damage even further by lowering enemy physical defense by 50 percentage points. And for some reason, Element Genesis happens to be physical too, which is absolutely fantastic. I don't know why, since it's the Melia skill, but oh well. Cypher edges here over Eye for weak points solely because most battles are not going to last long enough for Eye for weak points to matter, so the immediate crit rate is going to be better, especially when Masha is involved. Critical damage is less important because of Masha as well. My gem setup includes Empowered Combo and Analyze Weakness, as you might expect, for general damage increases that are super important as independent multipliers, but I'm also running Swelling Blessing because this will boost the power charges I give myself with Cross Impact, as well as the Awakening effect that Seraph gets from taking a certain amount of damage, meaning all damage from this is increased even further. Now let me explain in a bit more detail how you want to play this for the most success. So the general strategy is obviously to use Element Genesis to get as much damage as possible. In order to do this, you need to use Summon Element at least once in these fights, because you want to make sure you have the elementals to get as much damage out of Element Genesis as you possibly can. In order to do this, you want to make sure you're taking advantage of the Chain Ring by canceling your arts in an order that'll allow you to take advantage of that. Starting off with Leveling Fire into your Fusion Inferno Dance Summon Element, and then into Cross Impact and Element Genesis can give you a ton of additional damage if you stack up your attack boosts. If you use a launch charge at the same time, you'll get the big boost to all of your damage thanks to launch charges, or Seraph's ability to do more damage to launch to enemies. You can also cancel into the Flame Lord Quick Draw effect as well. This will give you an additional art as well if you want to get even more damage on your Element Genesis if you think you need it, but if you're already hitting damage cap, it doesn't matter as much. And if you want to get the absolute full damage bonus, if you think you absolutely need it, I would recommend doing Leveling Fire, into the Fusion Art that gives you Element Genesis, into Flame Lord, into Quick Draw, into Cross Impact, and then into Element Genesis. And that is going to allow you to have the full 6 arts to basically get as much damage as possible from Element Genesis from the independent multiplier from Shackle Ring. Although most normal mobs, you're definitely not going to need that much damage. You might want it on a couple boss fights towards the end, although it doesn't really even matter for that much because most boss fights can just melt to a general combo of Leveling Fire and then the Fusion, Summon Element, Inferno Dance, into Cross Impact, into Element Genesis, especially if you use a launch charge with it. But you can see right here, I'm not even really trying that hard right now. I can just use my Fusion with Summon Element, and then my Fusion with Leveling Fire and Cross Impact to get Power Charge and give myself Awakening. And then Element Genesis from there still does millions of damage, which is absolutely crazy. So this is what happens when you stack up your money bags, as you might see in the corner there. I've got over 100,000 here, I've got a ton of attack boosts, and I'm still going absolutely crazy. I have no gauge as well. I haven't even needed to buy Nopon gauge because we're not really at the point where it actually matters. Some bosses later in this challenge absolutely require more than one rotation though, so you are going to want to make sure you have gauge for those. Personally, if you can get a refill from a Whimsy, a 30% refill, that is ideal because it allows you to keep your bonus when under 50% health, the 500% damage bonus there, which is awesome. I'm also running a lot of attackers here, as you might imagine, and a lot of Agnians here to get as much damage boost as I can, since this setup is just all about one-shotting enemies as soon as possible, so you don't really need a supportive or defensive setup here. I do have Nia just in case to make sure I can live some additional attacks at the start of these fights, because she has the damage reduction, so that's the only real safety I have here. So, just showing off the boss fights now, again, and towards the very end where you're going to need more than one rotation necessarily. I still try to start off with the same thing. I use Flame Lord, Quick Draw, I use Inferno Dance, Summon Element, Cross Impact. I'm able to get a full 6 art cancel here just in case I need it, and you can see just all the damage caps absolutely everywhere. Only Mobius D lived that, he's a little bit too much health. He's going to activate his Sanguine Fire ability, but I'm just going to try to set up a combo again with all of my abilities. I've also got all the art recharge, you might imagine those effects as well, because those are additional curses to give me even more damage here, which is nice. And then he goes down pretty quick to a second Element Genesis. And I do a very, very similar combination here. I just mess it up a little bit slightly. I don't get the full 6 cancel, I only get a 5 cancel this time, but it doesn't really matter because I'm still hitting damage caps without too much issue, as you can see there on my crits. But this needs more than one rotation this time, so I'm going to set up an additional rotation this time that does mostly the same thing. I actually canceled an Element Genesis properly that time a little bit, and we do another launch charge, and I'm able to kill Mobius D and J very quickly, and OMP is almost dead. So I only needed 2 Element Genesis here, thanks to all of my crazy attack boost, thanks to my money bags bonus, and that just kind of shows the power of this build. It gets absolutely crazy. It's very, very easy to execute once you know what you're doing, and as long as you have the right build. Once you kind of experiment with it yourself, you'll kind of see it's really not that hard. Most bosses before stage 120 just go down pretty much instantly. It's pretty insane. I'll also briefly outline my Full Metal Jaguar setup. I won't spend as much time on this one since it's very similar to the Evasion solo build I showed yesterday, but the main difference here is Mighty Beat over Jackal Claw, so you have access to a Smash Art, which goes very well with Launch Charge to smash multiple enemies at once with a powerful Demolition Fusion. Ideally, you use Launch Charge after activating Demolition for the most success. Besides that, it's very similar to the Evasion setup, relying a lot on Art Recharge and being in Evasion as much as possible to not take damage. This setup also has access to a lot of strong support abilities thanks to Nia, Miyabi, and Masha, and can deal a lot of damage thanks to Dexterity boosts and crit boosts that you can get easily now. Crit recharge is still super important to this build, and I highly recommend running it if you want to be in evasion as much as possible. And chain attacks are way better now thanks to having a party, and can be used on bosses for maximum success. Obviously, the pro ring would go on her instead of Senna if you are using this setup instead. This one's really about as you would expect also, though. It's really not too difficult here. I'm just kind of using my arts as they come off cooldown. I'm a lot tankier thanks to the team composition that I'm using in this situation compared to other situations. I've still got the double evasion, but overall it's just kind of pushing through enemies a bit slower, but a little bit safer than a lot of other options here. I find this setup to be decent once you can get going, though, and you can definitely do a lot of damage with it when you have all the party boosts, and especially if you have Mosh in the party, especially if you got all the attack boosts possible. There's a lot of really cool things in this build, and one thing I haven't mentioned is the attack boost after using a chain attack. That's really impactful on boss fights, especially if you use an early chain attack in those fights. I'm not going to show off a full boss fight with this build since it's a little bit slower, and the chain attacks themselves are a little slow, and this video is already pretty dang long already, and I don't still see the need to drag it out any further than that. But you can just kind of see here how I generally approach with this type of setup here is just kind of trying to get my arts, trying to use AoE as much as I can, using my fusion combos, and even if I die, it doesn't end up mattering too much in this situation with this type of build because I've got healers to revive me. I have Asher, who also has a memory locket as well, with a certain team composition at least. And I don't actually recommend this composition on hard mode. I would recommend playing a little bit safer than even this if you want to, because there's really just no reason to do this. This is not the build with the maximum art recharge that you might be used to, so I don't have as much evasion here, but I have a lot of damage. And like I said, if I use Launch Charge and Demolition Combo, you get a lot of benefit out of that as well. All in all, though, there are a ton of different ways to approach this Gauntlet. I've seen a couple auto-attack builds on Twitter from a Chinese player. I've seen people actually have success with debuffs, especially Bind in this challenge. It's actually pretty incredible just how many ways you can make this work if you really know what you're doing. So I think that's probably going to cover it for this guide. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Alakusu and Hamadou for helping me with the Seraph build. They're the ones who originally came up with it, and it was really fun for me to use myself, and I hope you guys have learned how to use it and had fun, or are going to have fun using it as well. I think that's going to cover it for this video. I don't really have too much else to say. I hope this guide was beneficial to you so you can learn how to play this game mode and hopefully start farming those blue Nopon stones so you can get more funny accessories. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all the support. If you did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, please look forward to all of my future guides on this series and any other videos I might make. Have a wonderful and blessed day, and hopefully I'll see you back here soon.